Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk all things health and healing from a holistic perspective, and today will be no different. Today we're going to talk about the truth about Ozempic and drugs like Ozempic. Is this a weight loss drug miracle, or is this a ticking time bomb waiting to happen? So we're going to explore that. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible, give you guys the facts, the truth around it, that unfortunately when you hear the commercials or your doctor's telling you about it, these things aren't mentioned. And it's really important we have this conversation because the drugs are becoming so popular. Now you're seeing celebrities touting how it changed their life and it's their new go-to. And I'll tell you, celebrities are never the people to watch when it comes to your health. We got in trouble about this around the pandemic. And I feel like this is the reason why so many people now are using, a lot of cosmetic surgery. This is why so many people are now using this drug today as well, too. So we're going to dive into and sort of give you a roundabout idea about, is this a miracle drug, or is this something that is just a ticking time bomb, just like every other thing that happened before, where it was touted and, people were celebrating it and doctors were throwing it out the window like candy. But we're going to explore that. Now, one of the things, as I was doing a deep dive around Ozempic and Wegovy, which is another drug that is very similar to it. And when I mention one or the other, you can essentially lump them into the same case. So I'll go back and forth, but I'll primarily mention Ozempic. One of the things that I discovered as I was doing the internet dive was Jimmy Kimmel's speech at the Academy Awards. And as he's surveying the crowd and telling the crowd how good they looked, he was like, I'm wondering at this moment, is Ozempic good for me? As they always say in the drug commercials. And you also saw, I believe it was Elon Musk touting how Wegovy was his savior when it came to maintaining a healthy weight. So again, these are very popular people out there who are being very, they're being very honest about what they're using to lose weight. And so what I want to do is give you an understanding. But here's the thing. Being someone who's filled hundreds of thousands of prescriptions, and I had the duty of always explaining to people the side effects of drugs, and nobody really wanted to hear it. Everybody just wanted to get their prescription and go. You need to listen to these, okay? In short, there is no magic pill, but it's important you at least know what these potential side effects are. Now, what is Ozempic, Wegovy? They are a semaglutide or a GLP-1 hormone mimic, and that's an injection drug. Now we have different types of drugs like these, and I'll get into why these drugs are being used specifically, but it is essentially a GLP-1 mimic or a semaglutide injection that you take once weekly, okay? And it's FDA approved for diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Now that is important because you're not hearing people use this for type 2 diabetes. What you're hearing most of the time is people using this as a weight loss drug, okay? It is being used as a weight loss drug off-label, meaning this is not something that the FDA approved it for, okay, when it comes to Ozempic. So that's hugely important. But how does it work? It decreases your appetite, and secondarily, it slows down stomach emptying, okay? Now that does, when you hear that, you're like, okay, my appetite gets decreased. I want that. My stomach releases food slower, so it holds on to the food longer, which means that I don't feel hungry. Okay, that sounds good. Trust me, that second one, that's one of the biggest problems. And I'll explain it in just a second, but it's hugely important to understand that's how the drug pretty much works. And I'm going to be as honest as possible. Does the drug work when it comes to weight loss? Yes. People do lose weight on the scale, that number goes down. For some people, 20, 30 pounds. So I'm not going to be the person who says that it doesn't happen. Yes, it does. And I've seen it happen with people. And what I will tell you is that there's always a cost to pay. And not only do you see the weight loss, in some of the studies, it's been shown to reduce cardiovascular events by 20 to 30%, which sounds like another huge win. But it's also really important to know and understand this. All the studies that people are regurgitating, all of these studies have been paid for by Novo Nordisk, okay? The company that actually makes the drugs. And so I'm going to mention a few studies that, that are eye-popping, and some of the statistics that aren't being mentioned. And I think it's the things that aren't being mentioned. Those are the things that are swept under the rugs, and those are the things that come back later to bite us, okay? Now, I'll be the first to tell you, we have an obesity epidemic. In the last 50 years, when you think about obesity and the population of people who are overweight, in many cases, it has quadrupled. It's gone from about 10% to today, about 43% of people are obese today in America. 43%, okay? That's a huge number, and that obesity isn't including the people who are overweight, okay? People who are overweight and obese, that's about 75% of the population. And then when you start to look at our children, around 40% of our children are overweight, okay? So even before our children can become adults, they're overweight already. So yes, this is an obesity and an overweight and a fat epidemic, okay? And the reason why I'm calling it an epidemic is because we now know that excess body weight or excess body fat increases all risk for mortality, meaning it increases your risk for cancer, it increases your risk for a heart attack, it increases your risk for a stroke, it increases your risk for all causes of death. Okay, so this is why it's an epidemic. It has nothing to do with anything being cosmetic. This is about our health. And it's not just about our health as adults, it's now about our health for our kids as well too. So that's hugely important, especially when you consider the fact, as I mentioned before, 75% of the population is either overweight or obese, and somewhere around 60% of the population has one chronic disease, okay? That chronic disease could be anything from cardiovascular disease to hypertension to cancer to autoimmune condition. 60% of our population has a chronic disease, and about 40% of the population has at least two. So we're not only overweight and obese, but we're also very sick as well too. All right, so this is a huge issue that we definitely need to address. But today what we're going to be addressing is Ozempic, Wegovy, are these type of drugs the kind of solutions that we're actually looking for. Because again, obesity, excess body fat increases our risk for all causes of death. Okay, so it's definitely something we want to address, but do we want to use these drugs to be able to do that? That's what we're going to dive into today. And I think this is an important conversation because, as I spoke about before, about 40% of our children are overweight. And I think they just approved Wegovy, one of the drugs that is very similar to Ozempic. They just approved this drug for children who are as young as 12 years old, okay? And it's hugely important for us to understand the side effects, that long list of side effects that you hear throughout about 75% of a drug commercial. And you hear about 5 or 6 good things and then about a long list of about 70 different bad things that could potentially happen. I'm going to explain to you a lot of those potential, not only just potential, when I talk about this study that showed that compared to the initial studies, that in some cases, many of these side effects were increased by as much as 400%. Okay, and some of these side effects are life-threatening. So it's hugely important you know and understand these aren't just side effects that are cosmetic or uncomfortable. These are potentially life-threatening side effects, okay? All right, and I wouldn't even call them side effects. I would just call them effects because they don't happen on the side. They just come with the drug, okay? Hugely important. So let's get started without any further ado. One, and this is really important, the dark side or the downside to these drugs is that this is a unnatural weight loss. It's not a true weight loss in the sense that you shifted your lifestyle, and as a result, it shifted your metabolism. It shifted how your body metabolized fat, how it metabolized sugar, how it shifted how your body got rid of waste as well too. It's hugely important to know when you're using these drugs, this is an unnatural shift. Okay, and we'll talk about some side effects of that very quick unnatural shift. But even in some studies where they've done a comparative study, and what they've done in comparative studies is taken patients who got a gastric bypass surgery, changed their diet, and then taking patients where they just simply changed their diet, no surgery. And guess what? When you looked at the benefits of reduction in certain risk categories, they were just about even without the surgery, okay? So you gotta ask yourself, were any of the benefits because of the surgery or because of the diet shift? Okay, so, and that's hugely important because if you take this drug or you get the surgery, do you get all of the benefits that you would get if you naturally lost weight? Because a lot of times what happens is they look at what happens when you lose weight. Okay, what does that do to your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, hypertension, high cholesterol, okay, diabetes? They look at that. But what they're not considering is there's a huge difference between losing weight naturally, shifting your lifestyle, and losing weight by using drugs. Okay, you do not get all the benefits. So that's one of the downsides of using these type of drugs is that you're not getting the full benefits. And I'll explain why in just a second, but keep that in mind. There's a huge difference between losing weight naturally by shifting your lifestyle and losing weight by taking a drug. You don't get the full benefits, okay? Number two, and this is huge when it comes to the drugs like Ozempic, gastrointestinal issues, okay? Now, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea occurred in about 50% of people who took the drug. 50%. If there were 10,000 people, 5,000 people experienced nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Okay? 50%. That's huge. That's a huge number. Okay? But what I want to get into is the gastrointestinal issues that are potentially life-threatening. Okay? So those are the ones that are going to make you very uncomfortable and could potentially lead to some complications down the line that could be potentially harmful. But these that I'm about to explain are not only known to be harmful, but are potentially life-threatening, okay? The first one is called gastroparesis, okay? What is that? That is essentially when your stomach becomes paralyzed, okay? You remember when I talked about earlier how the drug works is it decreases the appetite, but then it slows down stomach emptying, okay? So that food stays in the stomach longer so that you feel fuller longer. Well, guess what? That is done through essentially paralyzing your stomach, okay? Which will eventually affect how you digest food, ultimately. And when your food is affected by how it digests, or your entire gastrointestinal tract is affected by this one chain link being paralyzed. I want you to think about this for a second. You got a bicycle, okay? And as you roll that bicycle, that chain link flows through, okay? And if you disrupt one piece of the chain link, you have disrupted the entire bicycle, okay? All right, same thing when it comes to our digestive system, especially when it comes to our stomach. So this is not just the issue where It's going to paralyze your stomach's ability to, to digest food and to release that food. But this is something that's going to disrupt the entire digestive cycle. This is hugely important because a lot of patients end up having what's called fecal impaction. Okay, that means that essentially they're impacted where they have so much backed up waste in their system that they literally, in some cases, lead to this next symptom, which is bowel obstruction, where now some people even have to get surgery to move this fecal waste through their digestive system. Okay, the next thing is pancreatitis. Okay, another gastrointestinal issue, pancreatitis. Pancreas, we all know that's essentially very much involved in how we metabolize sugar because it releases insulin. Well, guess what? This drug causes the pancreas to become inflamed and overworked. Okay, and pancreatitis could be fatal. Okay, it's important that you know and understand that. Now, in a JAMA study, okay, they had over 4,000 patients in this study. And when it comes to these 3 life-threatening gastrointestinal issues that I just mentioned, the gastrophoresis or the paralysis of the stomach, the bowel obstruction, and the pancreatitis, in that JAMA study, where they had over 4,000 patients, they were able to see that it increased the risk for gastroparesis by 367%. 367%. Okay? When it came to bowel obstruction, it increased the risk for bowel obstruction by 422%. When it came to pancreatitis, okay, it increased the risk by 900%. Put that in perspective. These are all life-threatening issues. Not only are they potentially life-threatening, but these are things that are going to affect your entire digestive system for the long run, for your longevity. Okay, so maybe you lose a little bit of weight in the interim, but this is something that's going to potentially impact your digestive system for the remainder of your life. Okay, so that's number 2. All right, number 3, 40% of the weight loss when it came to Ozempic, you were losing muscle. And I've told you how important it is. It's not just about losing weight. The most important thing you can lose is waste first, fat second. You never want to lose muscle. Muscle is an organ system, and it is very much important when it comes to our metabolism. As a matter of fact, that's where we store a huge amount of our glycogen reserves, our glucose reserves, to actually use for energy. That's where insulin actually takes our glucose to the muscle to go inside of a cell. Okay? Now you're going to be losing 40% of that. And when I tell you your muscle has a direct correlation with your longevity, it is directly correlated with your longevity. The more lean muscle you have, the healthier you are. That's why when we see with diabetics, one of the things we see with diabetics is muscle wasting. They just look like they're wasting away. And guess what this drug does? 40% of the weight loss that you lose, 40% of the weight will actually be muscle tissue, not fat, not waste. That is very, very important because what happens is now your metabolism is going to slow down. Okay? The weight is coming back. That's why that's important. Your muscle is key when it comes to actually burning calories. Okay? If you don't have muscle, it's going to be very difficult to burn calories. It's going to be very difficult to maintain a healthy weight. Okay? Among so many other things. Okay? Among the release of healthy neurotransmitters that are healthy for the mind as well too. Among the importance of that when it comes to the elderly population losing a lot of their muscle mass. Okay, and as a result, now you're going to see these fractures go through the roof because they don't have that muscle mass as well anymore too. So again, this is very important decision, not only for the elderly, but also for us who are the children of the elderly, who have to take care of them and help them make decisions. Because I'll tell you, one of the number one reasons why the elderly populations dies an early death is because of factors like hip fractures. Okay, so you lose 40%. 40% of the weight you're gonna lose will be muscle. Okay, you never want to lose muscle. All right. Number 4, the downside is that these drugs are very expensive. And generally speaking, most insurances do not cover the drug if it's being used for weight loss. So if you don't have a, a diabetes, type 2 diabetes diagnosis already and you're using this for weight loss, well, guess what? You're going to be on your own when it comes to paying it. And guess what? These drugs can cost you about $15,000 a year. Okay? $15,000 a year. And I'm going to explain why that is so important, because it could be a complete and utter waste of money in just a second. But yes, these drugs are very expensive and most health insurances don't cover them if you don't already have a type 2 diabetes. This is an off-label use for weight loss, okay? Which means that you're going to have to come out your pocket $15,000, okay? Number 5, retinopathy. Retinopathy is the damage of blood vessels in the eyes. So essentially, you start to go blind. This is one of the side effects, potential side effects, and downsides to these drugs. Okay? Hugely important. Again, this isn't something you can get back, or this is something that you want to lose. Okay? But it does happen. And unfortunately, this isn't something that is talked about. Okay? Number 6. 65% of the weight you lose will be regained once you go off the drug. See, what they don't tell you quite often is that you literally have to take this drug for the rest of your life to maintain the weight loss you do lose. Like I said, I see people lose the weight. I've seen people lose an astronomical amount of weight on these drugs. But guess what? As soon as they stop, because the habits didn't change, as soon as they stop, guess what? 65% of the weight they lost is regained once they're off the drug. And here's why this is important. You remember what I told you a couple of side effects ago? That 40% of the weight you lose is muscle? Well, guess what the muscle helps to do? The muscle is there to help with your metabolism. Because you lost 40% of it, you're not going to just naturally gain 40% muscle. You know how difficult it is to gain that amount of muscle, 40% of your muscle? It is very difficult. And to lose that amount of muscle, you're losing 40% of the body's capability of maintaining your metabolism. Your metabolism is going to get slower, okay, as a result, once you come off the drug. And now that your metabolism is slower and you regain 65% of the weight, it's going to be even more difficult to lose weight now without that 40% muscle that you had before. This is hugely important. As I say this all the time, body composition is the more accurate measure of the picture of your overall health. You can't just look at the number on the scale. I like this. In the winter, I work out totally different, so I'm going to gain weight during the winter. Most of that weight that I gain is going to be muscle weight because of how I lift during the winter. I'm doing less cardiovascular activity during the winter. Okay? So I'm putting on more muscle. So I'm not even concerned about the number on the scale because of that. I'm also doing detoxing during the winter. So I'm losing a lot of waste out of my body and toxins out of my body as well, too. So I don't look at the number on the scale. This is why, again, body composition, your composition of muscle to fat, that is a more accurate picture. And like I said, number 6, 65% of the weight will be regained after you stop the drug. And I told you it costs $15,000 a year. Is that sustainable? Is $15,000 a year sustainable? No, it's not. Not when you have the opportunity to shift your lifestyle. It's not sustainable. That's not sustainable for anybody, to be honest with you. especially when you're not getting all the benefits that you could get if you made a lifestyle switch. So hugely important. The other side effect or downside is something called Ozempic face or Wegovy face, okay? And a lot of people complain of this, that when they lose this weight, they lose it so quickly that their face starts to sort of droop and they look older, okay? Because it's an unnatural weight loss. Now, when you shift your lifestyle, what you'll notice is that you lose weight equally everywhere and it looks like healthy weight loss. As a result, you look younger as a result of that. But one of the downsides of using these drugs is you get that Ozempic face or Wegovy face, okay? And people look older, not only older, but their face sort of sags and droops as well too. Now, I hope this has been helpful. You could do your own research, look up all of this kind of stuff. I think it's hugely important. You always do your own research. But it's important to know and understand that we're constantly being targeted for the same toxic foods that make us fat and sick. Every commercial, there's a target for us to eat fast, highly processed foods that make us overweight, that make us sick. And then they retarget us again with these same drugs that say, hey, I can help you lose weight. It's almost like someone going to a country to secretly start a war and then going on the other side of the door of the country to sell them weapons. Okay? We have got to wake up. This is not a true solution to weight loss. This is not a true solution to health. And I think that's really, really important. We have to adopt a healthier lifestyle. And that means changing how you eat. That means removing toxicity. That means exercise, getting enough sun, breathing, etc. That is what is far superior when it comes to any drug. I hope this has been educational. Please share this. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, comment below. Let me know if this video has been helpful for you. And if not helpful for you, because I know that as people are moving into the new year, they're ready to make health resolutions and they're going to their doctors to get advice. And unfortunately, a lot of them will be told about this drug. And what I want you to do is make an educated decision for you. Make the one that leads to a lifestyle shift to add not only years to your life, but add quality of years to your life. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.